So I'm very proud to introduce Charles Hugh Jones from Sanofi, who's the Chief Medical Officer in the United States, and Joel Beach, who is Head of Patient Advocacy at Celgene, who will walk us through what Project DataSphere is, what it's accomplished, and what its potential is in the future. So Charles, please.
Thank you, Mace.
Thank you.
So firstly, thank you very much, Marty, Chris, and Bob, for the invitation to speak today. It was a great honor last night for all the team to be recognized for receiving the Charles A. Sanders Award. And I know when I go back to the team at the end of today, I think they'll be very proud for the recognition that they've got. The award actually goes to really very many people, and that really has been emblematic of what this project's been about. There's been a huge contribution from our colleagues at SAS and our colleagues at Hogan Lovells, which has just been extraordinary. On top of that, our colleagues at Saatchi, we've got Lou Iovino in the audience here, have been tremendous help. Stephen Friend at Sage Bionetworks. We've worked very closely with Vanderbilt University, with Duke, GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, AZ, to name but a few. Also, patient groups, which has been critical to the success going forward, I believe, of Project DataSphere. And then finally, I really want to acknowledge John Dornan, who has been the glue who has held us together right from the very start. So thank you, John. So the basis of Project DataSphere is that despite substantial effort and some notable successes in certain areas, the progress in cancer research has been both slow and expensive. And data sharing represents one of many areas that can contribute to improving some of that success in cancer research. And there are many benefits to data sharing, not only transparency, which Chris mentioned last night, but issues related to reduced duplication of what we do with clinical studies, building disease models, comparing real-world data versus clinical trials data, putting in standards, and then something that affects all of us is building efficiencies into our clinical trials to see if we can reduce the amount of cost for the amount of outcome we get out of them. But what data sharing does need is a large amount of data to benefit from that. And that's why I'm going to be calling on everyone at the end to see how we can build up a resource that's going to be effective for everyone in the cancer research community. Making data share happen has been one of the really big issues that we've dealt with in the last few years, given that primarily that data sharing is using data for which it wasn't primarily intended. So we've focused as a team very much on 5 key issues. One is intellectual property. The second is privacy. The third is security. The fourth is the resources you need to do it. And then fifthly, what are the incentives? Why would we actually even want to data share? And we've worked very closely with Vanderbilt University on privacy. We've worked very closely with Hogan Lovells on a lot of the IP issues to make sure we get a balance between what donating or providing companies give versus what researchers can reasonably be expected to get on their side. With IT, we've had fantastic security advice from SAS, and then we've kept a very close eye on what it is that we've done in terms of resources to prepare data to make it available to share. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to pass over to Joel Beach from Celgene. Joel represents the first of several companies who have stepped forward to come on board to Project DataSphere. And they've done it not only without hesitation, they've actually, Sanofi is putting together 4 comparator arm data sets as a kickoff, and Celgene has matched that 4 number for number in terms of committing going forward. And so huge congratulations and thanks to Joel and to Celgene for that. What I would also add is that Joel managed to do that within 6 months of joining Celgene, which is a remarkable job in itself. And in fact, I'm just about to buy a new apartment in New York City, and I'm actually putting on my negotiating team because I think he's just the person to have. So I'm going to then ask Joel just to explain a little bit about some of the specifics and really what that meant for Celgene in terms of intellectual property, security, privacy, resources, and incentives. And then at the end, I think we're both here available to answer questions. What I would also say is there is a lot of very specific detail about data sharing in each of these areas. And whilst today we'll give you a flavour for what happens, and we would love to get commitments from each of the company, we are committed as a team, we've got a very effective project management team, to come into each of your companies and explain the real intricacies of intellectual property, why we've made the decisions as they are, the decisions related to privacy, it's a complex area, and help you through that process so we can minimise the barriers as much as possible. So let me start by showing you the thesis in that for the last 30 years there's been huge progress in all areas of medicine, and this is an example of cardiovascular medicine. I showed you this slide last year. There's been a halving in the death rate, things like statins, aspirin and so on. If you then overlay cancer on that graph, it's a much more sobering prospect. And you start to see a dip around 1991, but the reality is that 14% dip from 1991 to now is predominantly made up by changes in smoking habit. And that very much talks toward the benefit of what we do with the gold standard, but it's sobering in terms of the true effect that we have for the totality of cancer around the world, with 7.8 million people dying. So what DataSphere has been a fully public, and I reiterate, fully public platform of responsibly de-identified, historic raw cancer trial data, together with the protocol and the case report form. And then as part of phase 2, we're going to be introducing advanced analytics, very kindly donated by SAS, and collaboration tools to really create an ecosystem for using this data effectively, with the goal of responsibly speeding cancer research. And as part of phase 1, we believe that we've got solutions to each of those 5 areas I've talked to you about: security, IT, privacy, resources and incentives. And we have now the IT platform built. We've got a very strong team with a project management office, together with partnerships including Sage Bionetworks, CDISC and so on. And we've initially got 2 Sanofi comparator arm data sets fully prepared. We've got another 2 being prepared at the moment. We've also got 4 more from Celgene, and then we have several other interested parties preparing data sets, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end. And we're looking to launch this into the public space in Q2 of this year, with a goal by the end of 2013 of having 60 comparator arm data sets in the repository. And I emphasize again that the power behind this is by having lots of data sets, not by having a few. So we need your support and we need your data. So we spent a lot of time designing this. We spoke to virtually everyone we could think of, and I have to say I thank Joel for his amazing contacts with a lot of the folks we spoke to. We spoke to FDA, we spoke to the Institute of Medicine, we spoke to patient privacy groups, we spoke to a variety of different academic and commercial entities in designing how we build Project DataSphere. And this is it. This is the actual website that in a couple of months' time you'll be able to go to and download data. Now what I want to do, just before I start showing you a little bit around it, is play you an embedded video that we have. It's very much driven by advocacy groups. This is a short little clip that hopefully explains the essence of what Project DataSphere is.
We've been hard at work researching cancer for many years. We work in our separate teams, running all kinds of tests, mining the data for all it's worth, and we've made a lot of progress. But the fact is, we're not getting there fast enough. There are still too many people dying from cancer, and these people, the ones that give of themselves in all aspects of finding treatments, the ones that struggle with this disease each and every day, they need you to do something different. For well over 40 years, researching separately hasn't worked. What would it look like for us to work together, to learn and benefit from our collective experiences? That's Project DataSphere. Project DataSphere is a way for all of us to team up, to pull our data and minds together to find solutions for cancer. See, right now, after the testing is completed, that data, filled with potential, usually just sits on the shelf, collecting dust. Project DataSphere is a way for researchers to share this untapped data securely. The more data we can collect, the more brilliant minds we can pull together. Just think of the possibilities that could happen in the world of medicine with this new approach. It's time to re-energize the data sitting idle on the shelves. Give promise and hope to those who have given to the cause of cancer research. And join together to make a difference in the lives of patients and their families. Find out more about Project DataSphere today.
So there you are, a very short snippet about what the essence of Project DataSphere is. So what we've got here is a copy of the website that will be going live in the next 2 to 3 months. And what you see on the left-hand side, a whole lot of tabs, information about what the project is, but also critically tabs where you can access data, you can share data, you can actually upload it automatically, user guides and resources to how to do this effectively. And again, you just click onto each of those areas. Applying for access is very simple. It's again, really very different from going into something like iTunes. You apply for access, you put your details in. The critical point here is that the access is going to be fully public for the data that goes into these websites. And there are very critical reasons for that we can talk a little bit about possibly at the end. Once you've got your access, once you've filled in your application form, you then go to a data use agreement. We've spent a large amount of time, and again with Hogan Lovells' help, we got lawyers from 15 different companies together in Washington about a year ago. And I promise you, lawyers from 15 different companies is quite an event in terms of coming up with a consolidated data use agreement. A huge amount of work has gone into this in terms of providing a balance for what it is that people are committing to when they use the data, but also what we're committing to when we provide that data. Once you've done that and you've got a full registration, you're then free to access the data. And this works very similarly to clinicaltrials.gov. You put in your criteria, or you can access all the data. And from that, you get search results. And then you click on your search results. It'll either take you through to clinicaltrials.gov, or it takes you directly to the data. And you end up here in the data. The protocol is full public access, even without registration. And that's very consistent with JCO guidelines and other journals now. You have to be registered to then access the data within the grey box. Once you've got your registration, you are then free to download these comparator arm data sets into your own SAS environment or whatever environment you're using within your university and so on. And so that really, in summary, is it. It's a very simple concept, but it's incredibly complicated in terms of the amount of thought that's gone into how we deal with the privacy, the de-identification protocols that we put in place, the legal protocols that we put into place as well. But I think what's exciting about this is what happens in the future. And the first thing I want to show, which is showing on behalf of SAS, is the incredible, oh sorry, I'm missing one slide. So the value chain that we believe that we get with Project Datasphere is fundamentally, we've got all these data sets that once we've used them for a registrational filing or for a trial, sit in our basement, sit in our warehouses, fundamentally doing nothing. And what we want to do is to create this concept of a library with aisles for prostate cancer, colorectal cancer, and so on, that people can freely go, take those, as it were, those books off the shelves, and then work in the library to rehash that data for different ways, maybe for doing disease models, maybe for optimizing CRFs, and so on. And so what we've done as the first stage of this value chain is to do the sharing component. This is the sharing module. But our goal is to go much further and to put in space collation software, to put in analytic software, and actually to build a whole environment around discussion boards for people who are working in all sorts of different places around the world to be able to work on projects with their data. And there are lots of good precedents for this that we can discuss as well. And so really just to add to this, this is an incredibly generous offer by SAS, is for them to provide 3 of their most advanced analytic frameworks. One is the clinical data integration, the second is SAS drug development, and then the third is SAS Visual Analytics Explorer. These are going to be baked into the website. What this means is that if you are a medical student in China, if you're a researcher in Brazil, if you're a kid who's doing a project anywhere around the world, you have not only the data, but you have these highly sophisticated analytic tools available to you free of charge in which to start exploring this data. And that's an immensely powerful and exciting concept. And similarly, data integration with Sage Bionetworks is providing a very similar type of resource. I can talk a little bit about this at the end. So what we've achieved so far, we committed by January 2013 that we would have an understanding of the data sharing environments. We would have test data sets that have been de-identified according to the protocols that we've built with Vanderbilt University, the world experts on de-identification. We've done our IT phase 1. We've built the sharing environment with a plan to what phase 2 and the actual analytics and communication environment is going to be. We've put together a management office. We've got the governance and LLC, as Marty spoke to earlier. We have legal agreements complete, de-identification protocols, and a full stakeholder plan to reach out to different organizations, both academic and commercial, in terms of defining what the next steps are. So our commitment to you is that we've done that. Now we want to turn around and say to the CEO roundtable members, we need your commitment, we need your support, we need you to be talking about Project DataSphere, but most importantly, we need your data. And I'll ask you about that again at the end. We're going to be moving on with the phase 2 infrastructure if you really believe this is something that's critical and important, and we're going to be looking to launch in 2013. As we go into the launch, we've had a huge amount of public interest. We've had articles in the journal Science about Project DataSphere, in Cancer Discovery. We've presented it at the Institute of Medicine workshop on data sharing, and we've got a whole variety of other avenues where articles are coming out. Universally, we've had support for this from both the patient side, academic side, and from the commercial side. And so we truly believe that we are going in the right direction. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Joel, and you're going to talk a little bit about Celgene's fantastic commitment. Great. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Charles, and thanks to all of you, and thanks to the Roundtable for our opportunity to share really the partnership that we've seen across what Charles described as the advocacy community, the industry, the academics, the technical, et cetera. So there's a strong partnership going on. We have made a lot of progress that Charles described, and really the goal for this and really the drive behind it is the hope for the patients that we serve every day. So I think the theme of the roundtable today and the partnership, progress, and hope fits nicely with this project as well. So thanks for the opportunity to give the update. So I was joking a little bit with Charles this morning is that being able to show videos and the website is a great opportunity. Now I have the tough part is telling you how to do this. But with the experience that I've had at Celgene over the last several months, it's not impossible. There are some things that do need to be overcome, and we'll talk through really those 5 areas that Charles described. Really, I think there's no doubt about why to do this. This is the right thing to do. We have a lot of people losing their lives every year to this disease, and there's a real strong need to do research faster and more efficiently. And this project, as we've been thinking about it, is really designed to look at the improved trial design, to look at what else can we do with the data, what can be done extensively with the epidemiologic power of multiple data sets. Disease model development, Charles spoke about that, but also, ultimately, is there an opportunity to reduce the number of patients in a control arm in a clinical trial? Does a lot of things, puts more patients into the experimental arm, also lowers the cost, but it speeds the course of the trial as well. And then I think there's a strong theme of transparency and reduced duplication that we've been talking about over the last really 24 hours or 12 hours or so here. And the collaboration and corroboration that has been really evident across multiple disciplines, both from academics, industry, patients, privacy, et cetera, has a great opportunity to build on what's already been done. There are data standard opportunities, and we've had discussions with CDISC that a lot of us, in the pharmaceutical industry as well as in academics, assemble our data in a certain manner, but there's always opportunities to do that better. And then the unknowns. I think this is one of the most intriguing pieces. It's very positive to think about what else can be done with data. This happens in the financial industry. It happens in a lot of different places where people get access to information to look at trends, to look at the aspects behind the data that I think this project can do as well. So we know that everyone's on board with this. There's no reason not to share data. However, the JCO says it's a great idea. There's an editorial in the New England Journal not too long ago about the next 100 years of medicine. It's in the financial journals. It's all over the place. The FDA thinks it's a great idea. But I think one of the challenges that Charles spoke about of the data that sits in our basements is that there's no doubt that there's a lot of it around. Everyone thinks it's a good idea, but it's just not used in the most comprehensive way, and this is an opportunity to do that. So these are the 5 areas that Charles was describing earlier in terms of the process to get through the identification of the data and putting it up on Project DataSphere. There are currently, as all of us know in the room, unique challenges in healthcare, whether it's on the trial level or on the access and the reimbursement level. there's a lot of very valid attempts that a lot of our colleagues have been working on. I think we are, as a project, identifying, collaborating with, and joining forces with a lot of the efforts that are going on in the world today on data sharing and trial optimization. We can talk a little bit about that, that coordination at the end. But also, the attitude is don't share unless I can prove no harm occurs. This is nearly impossible to do. However, where's the risk level for all of us? And I think as you walk through these 5 areas with me, you'll see that we've identified the risk areas, but I think as we look at our contribution as companies, where is your level of risk? And I think we have the opportunity to be very focused on that, but also really give back to the cancer community. So I'll start first with the privacy solution. This has been vetted through multiple areas. We've done a lot of research with our colleagues at IOM, with data privacy experts, really examining the HIPAA expert determination method and also aligning with our EU colleagues to make certain that the data are appropriately de-identified and that we're looking at not using a cookie-cutter approach like Safe Harbor to eliminate really all of the identifying points, but using a generalization strategy that allows us to keep some of the data points, dates and time, et cetera, which are very important for cancer research, but also scrubbing as much as possible so that there is a very low risk of re-identification. You'll hear through most of these sections that we have a considerable amount of time spent looking at the enrollment process, who will access this. We want to open it as much as possible to the public to allow researchers to look at a lot of aspects of the data that we haven't thought about. So the enrollment process is an online form, very easy to do, but again, it's governed by Project Datasphere. The use agreements for both the data provider and the data user ensure this level of privacy. And the data security, which is part of one of our 5 pillars, has been provided by SAS, and I'll go into a little more detail. The consent of the patients is really deliberately not obtained. One of this is patients actually can revoke their consent if they want to, but the HIPAA rules indicate that you don't need it. So I think this is a great opportunity to continue to use the data. The second section is the security solution, and SAS has provided basically all aspects of every bullet point on this slide in terms of their hosting environment, and there's a hosting agreement between SAS and Project Datasphere that our legal department at Celgene wanted to take a look at to ensure all of these security-related issues, as when we put data up or when any provider puts data up, that they're secure in where the data sit and who will be accessing it. So firewall-related issues that ensure transmission between both the upload and the download, also virus scanning, all of the necessary aspects of both data acquisition and data upload. And then the enrollment, again, we're going to stress this throughout all. There's role-based permissions to get enrolled. There's password-related activity. Charles mentioned an iTunes-type environment, but there are application processes and user agreements that will go along with that enrollment process that will ensure the security of the site. Thirdly is the IP solution, probably one of the biggest obstacles, or maybe not obstacles, but barriers that I think all of us are thinking about, but also that we faced. A couple of discussions that I have had with our legal department as well as our commercial colleagues asking me questions about IP protection is, they keep asking me questions, and they said, I really want to say no to this project. I cannot find a reason why to say no. So, I think the way that we've been working on this is that, again, back to the agreements between the provider and the user. It's comparator arm only to start off. The 60 data sets that we have identified for 2013 will be comparator arm. And I think from a protection perspective, the data provider maintains ownership of all existing IP and their freedom to operate within that. So not only can you be a provider, but you can be a user of that. So in discussions with our development team, asking questions about who will be putting data in, it's everyone and anyone. I think that's a great opportunity, but is there opportunity for all of us to think about our areas of interest, to recruit other colleagues to put data in that will benefit yourself as a company, but also benefit the entire environment? Also, there are limited restrictions on the use of the data, so that we want people to get in, to discover, to find new ideas, and again, to Charles' point about open environment. And then also, that there's an element of micro-attribution, which is really a common theme in all of the big data projects, in that we can acknowledge the contribution of the project, but there's no real need for manuscript review or direct oversight of project DataSphere. Fourth, resource solution. Another challenging element is that all of us are busy, our statisticians are busy, our trialists are busy, we're collecting more data on a day-to-day basis. But as we've worked through the Sanofi process and also our initial look at Celgene, is that there's really minimal resources required. So there's about 40 hours of statistician time that's referenced a little bit lower, but put that in comparison to a $100 million trial that perhaps you can reduce the cost or increase the cycle time on it, and we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. The infrastructure of the project DataSphere is there. So the questions that are asked about IT, legal, infrastructure, project management, those have been worked out over the last 18 months or so on this project. So as questions come up from legal departments and statisticians, we have experts and that resource available to answer those. The only real requirements is this project champion. I joined Celgene about 5 or 6 months ago, and that was me. But it didn't take long to find other champions within the company to push this forward because of all the great things it can do. The data preparation, again, on the 40-hour mark, we're working with Waze and working with SAS to find potential ways to either speed that up or outsource it entirely with oversight from the data provider. And then, legal review. There was contract review that I needed to go through both on the user agreements, but also the agreement between SAS and the project. So those three areas, not a lot of time spent by your champion, but I think because of the infrastructure of Project DataSphere, things can move rapidly, or even more rapidly than I had success doing. Lastly, I think this is one of 2 slides I'd like to share with you about really the reasons that getting involved in this and what are the incentives for the data provider, the data user, the researcher, and especially for the patient. I think there are models out there, and Sage Bionetworks does this very well. And for the researchers, can we accelerate research by putting competitions in place to look at the most optimal comparator arm, or other things that we can develop competitions? The patients, as Charles mentioned, have been incredibly supportive of the project. They've been pushing us almost faster than we can go because they know the data are out there, and they wonder why we're not using it in the most appropriate way. So explaining to them that we can use data more effectively and efficiently, I think has been a very strong point made from the patient side. And then from the provider, for all of you in the room and your companies and academic organizations, there is, this is a pre-competitive or a co-competitive environment. I think we can call it that. There's a lot of crowd insights that perhaps we haven't had. We do a lot of our own data analysis sequentially within our own companies, but as you assemble these shelves of data that Charles described, I think there's a great opportunity to assemble more people looking at it. It's productive. There's increased ability for visibility on your projects. Again, the collaboration and transparency opportunities are huge. And again, just finally, this is the right thing to do. So simply put, a couple of our colleagues from the Lilly organization 3 years ago published a great paper looking at how productivity in development is sort of put together in a very simple equation with the work in progress, the probability of success, the value of the project you're working on, the cost and the cycle time. It's no doubt that if you can decrease the denominator and increase the numerator, your productivity goes up. So this is a very simple sort of, in my mind, way to look at the project. We've been talking about fewer number of patients, increased cycle time, increasing the speed of trial. So a lot of focus of the project looks like we can hit the denominator quite easily. So with this, keep this in your mind, and I'll leave this equation in your head so you can do your own calculations about how is it that you and your companies and you and your organizations can think about what the real value is for your company, and also how you can develop partnerships and progress the cancer research we're doing right now. So with that, I will turn things back over to Charles for the next steps and the closing comments.
Thank you, Joe. So that was by necessity, a fairly rapid view of what is a very complex area. There's certainly many hours of discussion around IP, around privacy, around security that I think that you all should have and should demand, because this is not a simple area. That being said, we as a project team are committed to making that happen, to help you through the process and provide you with the resources to do that. That being said, what I would say is a huge amount of the fixed costs, as it were, the infrastructure, the legal agreements, all the stuff, the non-recurring activities behind this project have been, I believe, solved. What we need now are the variable costs, where we can take this from being 8 to 10 data sets up to 60 data sets this year. If we can get 2 to 3, 4, 500 data sets over the next 4 to 5 years, you suddenly start to get a nidus of information that becomes hugely valuable for development, and we can talk a little bit about that in a second with what Sage Bionetworks does. So I'm just going to really finish by saying that this is a fully public platform of de-identified, fully de-identified, responsibly de-identified, historic, raw cancer trial data. We're not asking you to give us the crown jewels, but the stuff that you've had sitting in your basements that's maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years old still has huge benefits in terms of ongoing cancer research to prevent duplication, to increase understanding and increase efficiency. We've put together phase 1. We believe that we've got very in-depth solutions to the 5 key areas that Joel has reviewed very nicely. And we're looking at doing a launch in Q2. Our goal, as I said once again, is to get to these 60 data sets. We've got about 8 or 9 now. I'm looking to the audience as a whole to see if we can make a commitment to get to that 60 data sets by the end of this year. So I think with that, I'm going to finish. I hope that's given you a good oversight of what's at stake. I hope it lives up to expectations. I think there was an awful lot of drum rolling in the last couple of days, and so I hope we've managed to do that. But I would now pass it over to some discussion. I think we've got sort of 15 or 20 minutes maybe that we can have a discussion.
Yeah, a very wise mentor once told me that in God we trust, everybody else provide data. And I think Project Datasphere really has done that. It's been prescient in its rollout. When the Life Sciences Consortium saw this project at its last meeting here at CES headquarters, it coincided with the 200th birthday of the New England Journal of Medicine. And the editorial in that journal was on data transparency. So data transparency is an issue whose time has really come. And what no one's really said is that this is the result of a 3-year effort. That's involved with leadership from CEOs like Chris, as well as cross-functional teams from companies like Sanofi, SAS, Celgene, and Hogan and Lovells. And I think of the 5 areas of risk that Project Datasphere has really de-risked those areas in ways that should allow people to share, Charles. And one of the things you mentioned, but you didn't follow up on, was what does the Sage Bionetwork provide to this platform?
Okay. So Sage and I Bionetworks is a group that we've worked very closely with. A lot of you will know Stephen Friend, based out in Seattle. He used to be head of clinical development at Merck. One of the things, and actually I've got a slide, if I may, just in a second. One of the things that I think is exciting is if I said to everyone in the room, could you do a log optimization or a 3-log optimization of a particular factor within your organization and do it within 9 days, you would hope that people would get kind of excited. And funnily enough, that's what something like Sage Bionetworks does in terms of crowdsourcing. And crowdsourcing is a funny concept. Since, and I've got a slide, since about 1650, when the first journal article came out, we rely on the fact that when you publish in a journal, it's your data. And in fact, if someone else copies your data word for word, you send them a nice legal letter saying, please stop doing that. Well, the funny thing is the world is completely changing, and there's a type of software that actually came out of Linux called a Git, and there's a GitHub, and there's another group called Atlassian as well. And what it does is it's highly sophisticated change management software or revision management software. And so what it allows to do, so what's starting to happen now within crowdsourcing is it's absolutely de rigueur to absolutely copy what the previous person's done and improve on it. So, which is a completely different mindset from where we've been before as a past. And the reason for that is there are some really substantial advantages in wholesale, what's the word when you copy someone's work? Plagiarism. Wholesale plagiarism is what crowdsourcing is all about. But it's interesting. What they do is they run competitions with this Git software. And what it allows for the fact is that you run a competition over 9 days. And traditionally, when we run a competition, usually we all put our entries in, and it's our entry. And when we get to the last day, we judge it and say you're the winner. Well, within the crowdsourcing world, and this is people probably much younger than all of us, what they do is they start the competition on the day you get the first entry, which you can see up here. I don't know if I can point, but anyway, you can see the first entry. And what happens with crowdsourcing is the rules are you can take that first entry and do whatever you like with it, but you have to improve it. And you put your second submission, and you put your third submission. And what you can see happens, and this is here in this particular example, a low score is a good score. The lower the score goes, the better you're getting. And this was a competition around protein folding, and who could come up with the best computer program to design protein folding. And what you see over a 9-day period, people are competing very rapidly and very fast to improve the code that's been put in. And so you actually get a 3-log difference between the first entry that started on day 1 and the closing entry that came in on day 9. And what's interesting is on this right-hand graph that it is downright plagiarism the whole way through. And they're proud of the fact that it is downright plagiarism as a group of programmers. Everything that's on the right-hand graph, each bar represents each sequential winning entry. And if it's the green part of the bar represents conserved code. That's stuff you've stolen off the previous entry. The red is what you've added to improve it. And then the next one is green for what you've taken off the previous one, and then more red that you've added. And what you can see is the vast majority of the improvement is stealing someone else's idea and improving it. But what you do as the outcome of it is you get a winning entry that is a 3-log improvement in score, better than the first entry. This is the sort of capabilities that's going to allow us to solve cancer. The way that you deal with this sort of thing is very sophisticated micro-attribution through the Git software. And it logs every single change that everyone makes through forks and merges of all the information and gives people credit for the work that's being done. And that solves some of the issues around the academic community, where people are worried that if they don't publish, they don't get reward for what they're doing. This is starting to change the way people are doing work. The software's only been around for 2 years. I think it's going to fundamentally change the way we work. And I think as we move forward with something like Project DataSphere, something I'd like to include. It's what they do already at Sage Bionetworks.
Thank you. Charles, just in that vein, I was just mentioning to Marty that actually, okay, we have now got companies putting data in, and you hope to get up to a certain number of data sets. But the power of this is that the data set gets bigger and the data set get better. So wouldn't it be good that if anybody who wants to access this and generate and use the access data to generate other data, has an obligation to put that data back into it to build the data set further? Now, Marty was mentioning, well, maybe we want to have some exceptions for students who may not generate any data. But I think if you're going to use the DataSphere, you have an obligation to actually improve it and put any newly generated data back into it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a point of question in that regard, Chris? Is it not true, Charles, that everything that is done in the sphere stays in the sphere?
No, it's not.
No.
At the moment, the contract specifies that you have to acknowledge the fact that you've got the data from the data sphere. What you don't get is a publication review for the very reason that if you're using data from 50 different sources, it would be impossible to parse out those publications to all the reviewers. So that's, again, something we've got to get over. Chris, I agree with you. It's challenged me in the way that we can enforce that sort of thing going forward. What we are going to do, and you saw this at the very beginning, is there is a tracker of who's been donating data. What we also know is through the registration process, who is downloading data. My feeling is, to begin with, that there has to be a social model around it in terms of that it's done on a quid pro quo. I think if we start to see that one organization or one group is using a huge amount of data but is never donating any data, then I think we start to have some discussions around that. I've struggled with how we can enforce that, but I'm very open to discussions about how we would do it.
Well, and I accept that. I'm just thinking before. I mean, the whole notion of this is that, you know, if we share the data, in very much what you're showing here on other types of contests, that we will get to answers faster. And we have seen this in other areas in the past, and we saw it in HIV. We're currently trying to do it in tuberculosis. But there has to be at least a social ethic that is created within the scientific community, because, you know, a lot of people have put a lot of effort to create this data sphere. And the power of that will be lost if the data sphere doesn't stay up to speed with all of the latest scientific evolutions and new data coming in. And so that if we really want this to really be a powerful tool to really accelerate, there should at least be some moral obligation, whether we can actually enforce it after or not, but at least people should be encouraged to share, because there's this collaborative nature in science, which is really what the founding principle of a patent was in the first place, right? Was that you could protect your scientific discovery to a point, publish it, and then someone else takes it beyond. But there's also the same obligation to publish. So now nobody can really enforce the need for publication, but it becomes part of the scientific ethic that in the way that you would publish, that you would also put the data back into this sphere.
No, I agree absolutely. I mean, I think the initial thought we've had as a team, and again, I'll be talking, Lou and I will probably be talking a lot of the messaging around this on the site, is creating that moral ethic. Have we integrated into the legal agreements? No. You have to acknowledge it in the legal agreements, but to put it back, no, not yet. But I think it's a good point, and I think it's something we'll take back to the team and consider.
Chris, there has been some discussions very similar to this at our company, asking questions about, all right, so which data are being assembled now, what is on the shelves, and what is needed, so that we can examine which trials we have and which we can put in, but also at the same time of that, what is it that we want to bring out? So perhaps we have a new therapeutic line, we have something else, so that is there a way not only to, you know, and maybe we work through this through the project, is, you know, a call for data, like, you know, lymphoma is not progressing, can we call for more data to accelerate? So those are the discussions that are happening at a company level, but we'll examine at a project level as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's something, again, just to pick up on that point, one of the areas where we're really trying to message around begin with is we've got 4 or 5 data sets now around prostate cancer. So really starting to have a prostate cancer challenge, maybe supported by the Prostate Cancer Foundation, that we can start posing certain questions around the data to which we're starting to look for answers. And again, Howard and I were talking about this down at Memorial Sloan Kettering just the other day. But I agree, it starts with a moral ethic, but I think we may need to look as things, I mean, it was always going to be a sort of luxury problem when we start to get all these data sets, but it's a problem all the same that we need to look at. Howard, I don't know if you've got any comments on that.
No, I mean, I've only learned about this really 3 weeks ago.
Howard, could you push the button and hold it down? Yeah, thanks.
Okay, hold it down. So having just learned about this project really 3 weeks ago, I think the potential is absolutely enormous. You know, in reference to what Chris was talking about, new knowledge will be created by the combinations of variables that are being defined, and that should be automatically put back into the database as it evolves. So just seeing this iterative process alone is you know, will be hugely beneficial. The other thing is, don't underestimate the investment that you've made in the infrastructure, because just modeling our own trials now and thinking about how to use what you have already created, it will be a lot different going to a sponsor and saying, look, 13 groups or 14 groups have already agreed on this language. You were part of this agreement. Why do we have to go through all of this again? So that in itself will accelerate our ability to execute the trials, which is really what we want to do. So we've learned over time that the information that's left on the table after a phase 3 trial is completed, which is really designed more to get a drug approved, it really doesn't give you insights on how to use it. So when you start putting together comparator arms, which are seemingly, not the prime data, in point of fact, they will identify subsets with particular unmet needs. They will lead to design of future trials for new types of new indications that we haven't even thought about. And as Bob was mentioning earlier, we will start to identify the subsets, but if you look at the model of how lung cancer has been dissected at a molecular level, the 5%, the 5%, the 7% start to add up. And before you know it, you've got, you've really characterized different diseases, not only on a molecular level, but on factors that we haven't even thought about. Where else can you start data mining, health and fitness? And again, this will also give us insights on how to record or even capture this data, because the data, the CRFs and the things we ask for evolve as well. So I think the impact is I think enormous is I guess the way you put it is the power of the exponent. I would say the power of the exponent on steroids. But really, this will affect every aspect of how we do business. And, even as an academic, we are in a business with defined goals, defined objectives, which at the end of the day is to be able to sit by a patient and say, I can do something for you that I couldn't do 6 months ago.
One of the member companies whose CEO made a pledge of data transparency was GSK, and I was wondering if we could call on Klaus to give us an update on what GSK is doing with data transparency.
GSK took a different approach from what you are presenting here, and that is in reality that we will make all data available for any marketed compound or any terminated project at about the same time that the primary publication for the trial result will be published in the scientific literature. So that means that we in reality gives you the comparator data as well as the active arm data. There is one other major difference to what you are proposing here, and that is that we do not operate on an open access system. We will operate under a system where there will be an external review panel that is being assembled at the moment that will make a call as to whether this has scientific validity. So in reality, it would not be a GSK decision as to whether any researcher or any other pharmaceutical company for that matter would like to do an analysis of GSK data, whether that has scientific merit or not. That would be sitting with that independent review panel. Those are the two big differences compared to what you're proposing here. I had the pleasure of joining you in January here at the SAS Institute when you presented this the first time to me. Obviously, I was aware of the Project Sphere from the literature, and I can just inform you now that GSK has also made a commitment to participate in Project Sphere. And that would obviously be GSK Oncology that would be willing to do that because we clearly see that the two systems can exist or coexist. And then obviously, eventually one could potentially hope that there would be an aim of even expanding Project Sphere to also have the active arm for any other pharmaceutical company or academic institution for that matter.
Let me thank you for your commitment to contribute to DataSphere. I think I respect GSK's strategy for putting all of its data out into a peer-reviewed repository, essentially, where it can be accessed. What I think the power of the DataSphere is that you put your data in with everybody else's data, which provides researchers with a much different point of access rather than having to go to a GSK site and do a peer review request and come to Sanofi and then go to Celgene. There's kind of a one-stop that I think could be quite powerful. And the more people who are willing to contribute, the more powerful we have a research engine here.
If I can just add, that has exactly been the driver for the GSK decision to say that if you want to have that possibility of doing direct comparison, in this case on compare to arm on many different trials, this is a golden opportunity to do it. And that is number one driver for the decision to join.
Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you. Bravo.
Yeah, part of the DNA of the Life Sciences Consortium is public-partner partnerships. And I wonder, Cheryl, you wanted to give an update on the IOM's data transparency efforts, and then we can open up to the consortium.
So the Institute of Medicine is very interested in the concept of data sharing, and we have been developing projects to try and facilitate progress in this area. And as Charles mentioned, we had a workshop in October of 2012 to examine opportunities and challenges in data sharing. As he mentioned, he described DataSphere at that workshop, and he also served on the planning committee, so thank you, Charles, for taking the time to do that. A summary of that workshop will be posted online on March 29th at www.nap.edu, that's National Academies Press. And you can download a PDF of the summary free of charge from that website. And we also archive the slides and the video from the workshop on our IOM website. In preparing for that workshop, we identified more than 30 examples of different efforts that are ongoing to try and share data. And most of these were focused on particular diseases or specific types of data or different stages of research and development. And so there was concern about people trying to reinvent the wheel while working within these different silos, or worse, potentially even working at cross purposes. So the IOM is working looking for ways to bring the stakeholders together to try to work on common solutions to these problems. And that may be either through a collaborative that brings the stakeholders together to discuss and develop solutions to shared challenges, and then they take those solutions back to their own institutions, or to launch a consensus study which would delineate best practices and guidelines for how to facilitate data sharing with the goal of trying to increase consistency and reduce duplicative efforts. So I would welcome any thoughts you have on that.
The IOM has been, really vital to all of this, as it's not only a common clearinghouse, but speaking of gold standards, has been always the gold standard of authenticity. And the CEO Roundtable on Cancer has been honored for the last 3 years to work with Cheryl as a member of the National Cancer Policy Forum of the IOM that actually is pursuing data transparency and data sharing. So, Cheryl, we're very grateful to you and the IOM for your leadership, but also for your hospitality in bringing the CEO Roundtable to the National Cancer Policy Forum. And it's been a joy for this member of that forum to introduce it to a number of the companies here, and we intend to do so in the future as well. Thanks, Cheryl.
Marty, you made a great suggestion at the executive committee yesterday, and that is it's great that companies are starting to put data into the data sphere, but of course companies aren't the only people who generate data. So I think you had a couple of ideas there.
Thanks, Chris. That's a perfect tee up. And what I was referring to was a dear friend, Bruce Chapner, who you've heard from before. And Bruce, at our SAS meeting in January, stood up at the microphone and said, wait a minute, the taxpayers have paid for a lot of clinical trial data from, Bruce, push the button and hold it down and then fill it in.
NCI.
Yeah, from the NCI and the cooperative groups. Yeah, and so Bruce is encouraging, and I ask everyone here as well to encourage, because you touch the cooperative groups, many of you all the time, that all of those data belong also, I would submit, in the sphere. As Bruce said, it's already been paid for by the taxpayer, and there are challenges, clearly, academic that they may be, and I bet you we're going to hear from some of them. Please.
So along those same lines, all academic medical centers are now dealing with another unfunded mandate from the NIH, which is to deposit results of clinical trials, published or unpublished, in the clinicaltrials.gov. And I'm just wondering if there's some coordination that can be had between clinicaltrials.gov and this activity that could be either mutually beneficial or reduce the workload in terms of what's required to deposit in clinicaltrials.gov? Is this going to be more seamless in terms of having personnel that need to deposit the data?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. We've seen it as being a synergistic opportunity right from the start. I think we've got to the stage now where we've been spending a lot of our time on legal agreements, on IT infrastructure, on security, project management, and so on. I think we're absolutely now at the point where we need to start leveraging those synergies. As you can see in the actual website, we have direct links to clinicaltrials.gov. I think the more that we can synergize between those two groups, the better. It isn't a discussion that we've had directly yet, but it's very much one that's on our list of things to do going forward.
Charles, one of the things you may want to mention, or at least add to, is that the power of SAS is, if it's exponential, I've not seen it being limited, so it actually may be, you know, eternal. That they have a product or products, one of which actually automates the de-identification of data as one of the tools of the sphere may actually make available to those to lower that threshold, to also reduce the resources that you would have to otherwise, let's say at Duke, put into this, is actually to use one of the tools that SAS provides within the sphere that would enable that actually transferal of data and the de-identification thereof more smoothly in an automated fashion. So that's something that's not only under discussion, but we understand from SAS many of those tools already either exist or are very nearly ready for probing. So we hope that that'll help us well.
I'd like to raise another source of data which I think would be extremely valuable to put on there, and this is from foundations. For rare diseases such as the adenoid cystic cancers or the chordomas, they're very effective foundations now which are sponsoring clinical trials for quite rare diseases. And we lack large databases for these things. And these databases could be very valuable in getting drug approval because we would have then a comparator arm, a historical comparator arm for a disease where it's going to be almost impossible to do randomized trials.
Yeah.
Bruce, thanks. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Charles, but in fact, the FDA, maybe you want to comment on that. Joel, do you want to comment?
Go ahead, Adam.
Well, the FDA actually asked us, didn't they, to actually actively try and collect from the rare tumor types all data possible from everywhere, because as the FDA said, if you give us enough robust comparator arm data, we'll be able, as Howie you were just mentioning, you'll be able to eliminate, they will allow the elimination of the comparator arm, and far more of you who have potential or candidate drugs that you'd like to put into a trial in a rare tumor will be able to do so because of the lowering of the number of patients that you'd be required and the speed of that cycle time to actually get an answer, is it a drug or is it not? So the FDA, Bruce, is actually at the Project DataSphere table encouraging us precisely to do that, and that's very high on the agenda.
And the foundations, Marty, also are 100% behind that as well. They typically have the tissue samples and others that test drugs against. I think Sanofi has a very good history with chordomas, essentially, and testing other drugs. But I think the foundations and the advocacy community is incredibly supportive of it.
Finally, we want to give full credit through Amy Abernathy, don't we, at Duke, where Duke is right now one of the early universities who have already pledged. I don't know if you've heard about it yet, but Amy, you said you have, that your data is flowing right now from Durham into the sphere. So congratulations. Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Charlie, have a comment. Charlie has a comment.
Sorry, Charlie, that's okay. Could you just say it again?
Whenever you talk about collaboration, a number of legal questions inevitably arise. Where is the bright line here that we have to worry about crossing?
Maybe we could get Ann to, having spent, and you've become a deep expert in this subject.
As I recall, and Charles can refresh my memory since his memory cells are much younger than mine are, but I think along the way I've offered up our antitrust lawyers, who, by the way, remember when we did the START clauses, we actually went to the Justice Department and got a business review letter saying this was not a concern from an antitrust perspective. But so far I don't think we've found the need to do that in this context. But if we did find the need to do it, I think that's what we'd do to get some comfort for the lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, the one thing that's been a guiding principle with doing this is that we have to create a fair balance between the opportunity for the people providing the data and the opportunity for the people using the data. And I think, certainly from my side, from a closing point, is that we've really tried to do our due diligence, again, with Hogan Lovells' support, on the IP issue. You are retaining full IP and freedom to operate. This is data that has been used. You should have internally extracted from it everything that you need, but you're then making it available for the public to use. We've done the same sort of due diligence with Vanderbilt University in terms of the de-identification. To quote Andrew Whitty when he announced the initiative from GlaxoSmithKline, it is impossible to 100% guarantee full de-identification. Ours is 100 times safer than that's mandated by HIPAA. We think that's pretty good. And as Andrew Whitty was quoted in saying, he said, I might be 99% right, I might be 1% wrong. It's a risk I'm prepared to take. I think for the benefit of cancer patients, together with the insights and the pre-competitive environment we get from this, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. So we're available as a team. We're reaching out to all of you individually as Life Sciences Consortium members. We'd really appreciate your help and support in driving this to get the decision to be a yes, and then we can really help your individual teams in terms of doing that preparation of the data.
I'll close that session. Charles, Mace, Joel, thank you very much. We appreciate all that you've done for getting this up and running, as well as Ann on the legal side and Gail representing SAS. So I'd like to thank you very much, first of all.